Alright, before we get to the lesson for the day, I do need to go over a pre-teaching moment because your lesson credit, in order to get to your homework, you have to be able to answer a question that has to do with factors and finding numbers. So I want to walk through it real fast just to make sure you all remember it. Whenever it says find the factors of 60, this isn't what the question is going to ask you, but they might ask you to find numbers that multiplied equal 60 and add to equal, let's say, 32. And so what you want to do whenever you find the factors of 60 is just continually go through, start with the number 1, and you say 1 times what makes 60, which is 1 times 60, 2 times what makes 60, which is 30, 3 times 20, 4, if you don't know what the number is, you can just take your calculator and do 60 divided by 4, which gives you 15, and again you just follow that game all the way through to create your table. That is the safest way to do it. 5 leads to 12. 6 leads to 10. 7 doesn't go. 60 divided by 7, as you see, is a decimal. 60 divided by 8. And here's where you know you can stop. When the number you divide by is bigger than the answer you get, that means that you're on the big side of the list, because this should be the smaller numbers, that should be the bigger numbers. And from there, what you do is you look for the numbers that make whatever you're looking for to be true. If you wanted the ones that added to be 32, you would choose 30 and 2. Now on the one today, you might get a positive, you might get a negative. You might see something that says multiplies to be 60, adds to be, let's say, negative 17. Well, here's the thing. If it adds to make negative 17, that means that the big side should be negative. And if it multiplies to make a positive 60, it means that this side should also be negative, which means that in that case, this would be negative 5 and negative 12, whereas this would be 2 and 30. So just, if you get stuck on that, feel free to bring it over, but at least make the tree first before you come over and ask for assistance. Again, do as much as you can, go as far as you can before you ask for assistance, because that way you are at least getting better. You're going to need that next week sometime, probably about, well, after a few days of next week, so just keep that in mind. It does say day 1, but really this is a one-day lesson with everything put together. 3 main parts to today's information. The first part, at least, luckily 2 of them should already be within your range of algebra experience. We're just going to start with the one thing you have not seen just yet and move on to the rest of today's work. You might want to write down these definitions here. Monomial is any single term like 3x or a negative 8 or a 5x squared y. Again, that is a monomial because it's one term. That is one chunk of information. That is also one chunk of information. So all those are monomials. Polynomial is one or more monomials combined into an expression. So when you put this, these are all polynomials by definition, but once you start putting them together, they're just called polynomials. Alright? The degree is the number of variables attached to the term. I hope you write these 3 things down. You also have a quadratic, which is anything with an x squared as its highest power. Alright. Anything like that, you would say something like 4th degree, anything like that. You have also binomial, which has 2 terms. And you have trinomial, which, as you think about the word try, it has 3 terms. Again, degree, as you have written in your vocabulary, or should have written in your vocabulary, the degree is the number of variables attached to the term. Finding the degree is extremely simple. All you have to do is just count. If you're looking for the degree of some of these monomials, if you want the degree of this piece with the 8, again, you don't even really look at the 8. You don't need to cross it out, but we don't focus on the 8. We say there are 3 x's and 2 y's, which makes a degree of 5. Easy enough. Here we have 9x to the 6th. Again, we don't care about the 9. We look at how many variables are attached. There are 6 x's attached. That is your degree. 2m to the 7th n. Again, the 2 doesn't matter. Here's where people like to miss. There are 7 m's, 1 n, which makes 8, not 7, because remember that counts as 1. And then in this case, if it's just a number and we're not focusing on a number, notice that there are no variables attached. That would be a degree of 0. Alright? So again, keeping all that in mind, that's what we are looking at. Find the degree of a polynomial is also simple. In order to get it done, we must first identify the degree of each term in the polynomial. Next, we choose the highest of the degrees to represent the polynomial. So pretty much, that's the part you're looking at. So if you're looking for the degree of this polynomial, you break it down into individual monomial chunks, which is this. The degree of this is 1. The degree of this is 2 because there are two y's. The degree of this is 0 because there's nothing attached. The degree of this is 5. And again, you choose the highest. You don't add them, you just choose the highest. The degree of this polynomial would be 5 because the highest degree of that is 5. Alright? Again, individual pieces, and then take that and use the highest number. Hopefully you wrote that somewhere in your notes because you're going to need that also. 4x to the third y, 3y to the third, 6, 7x to the fourth. Again, going through here, you've got 3 and 1, which makes a degree of 4. Here you've got a degree of 3, a degree of 0, another degree of 4. And I understand that there's a tie, but nothing happens. You still just choose the highest degree. So even though there's two separate 4s, your degree of that is still 4. Alright? So overall, you simply count the number of variables of each monomial and just choose the highest degree. Again, whatever your highest degree is in that polynomial, that's what you're going to use as the degree of your problem there. Adding polynomials is the same as combining terms. Remember from the first chapter of algebra, like terms are two terms with the same type of variable attachment. These are like terms: 6x, 9x, negative 5x, 4x squared, negative 3x squared, x squared. Also constants, 6, negative 8, 4. Anything that you can put together would be called like terms there. Recognizing like terms is only the first step. You're also going to have to develop a system to organize your work. And again, remember I told you it's not about intelligence, it's about your work ethic. Start organizing your work. The best way to do that is a system that puts your answers in standard form. Whenever you're asked for standard form, it means that the powers go from highest to lowest. Alright? I'll use this system with the following examples. Just be sure to adopt this system into your work. Part of your responsibility in this lesson is learning to write expressions in standard form, so make sure you're paying attention to what standard form actually means. You're going to see questions like this on your work, on your quiz, on your tests. Notice they already have a polynomial here, polynomial there being added, but they already have all the terms lined up, and so all we have to do pretty much is just put everything together. Negative 3 plus 5 makes a negative 2, negative 7f, negative 2f makes negative 9f, 9f squared, 2f squared makes 11f squared. You have to remember during this section that whenever you are adding those things, that your power does not change. Like, that's where you got to be careful on that stuff. Again, when you're combining terms, 7f's and 2f's make 9f's, 9f squareds and 2f squareds make 11f squareds. That is honestly where some of your mistakes start to go. But again, as long as you're working through the homework, trying to make sure you make your mistakes early and not when it counts, you should be okay. This is the one where I talked about standard form. If it's lined up like this to where everything is kind of jumbled around, notice it's not in a particular order. The best way to do it is to start with the highest power, which means 5x to the fourth, and you look to see if 5x to the fourth has anything to go with it, which it doesn't, so you just bring it down. You look and see that there is an x to the third, and notice that there is no other x to the third to put it with, so we bring down a negative x to the third. You see an x squared here, but you also see an x squared there, and that's where you must put them together. Negative 3, positive 8 makes a positive 5, again x squared, and then the 4 has nothing to go with, so it just comes down. That is standard form, 4, 3, 2, 0. Notice it's going from highest power to lowest power. That's standard form. So whenever they're asking for standard form, just watch your signs and be careful. This problem here also, just want you to put it together. So the highest power here is 8p to the third, but there's nothing else to go with it. And notice how I'm trying to organize my work by marking off what I've already used so that I know where not to look. I have a p squared here and here. That's a positive 2 and a positive 9, which makes positive 11 p squared. I have a regular p here, also here. Negative 6, negative 5 makes negative 11, and then the negative 11 comes down. I hope I did that right, but for the most part, that's the general idea. Just make sure you watch your signs, make sure you watch the numbers, and put everything down in standard form. Again, notice 3, 2, 1, and then 0. That is standard form. Alright? Before moving on to your lesson, be sure to take a moment to answer the phone. No, don't do that. That's when we were doing the other class. As you noticed, a lot of your lessons are coming from the other class. This is now current because we're speeding up and trying to get this stuff done before, not before the end of the quarter, but just trying to fit everything in. Now thinking back to when you first learned about distributive property, we dealt with simplifying problems similar to this with a negative sign. Notice everything we've dealt with so far had a plus sign outside of the parentheses. Today you're also going to see negative signs outside. And remember that the negative sign just means opposite of, which means all you need to do is turn this into a negative 5x squared, a positive 4x, and a negative 3. That is simple. But again, what's going to happen is if you're trying to rush through your work, if you haven't been working on organizing your work, slowing down, and being more careful, then you're going to miss a lot of questions on today, because the rule I'm going to give you is anytime you have a negative outside of a parentheses, we can't just start. So what you're going to have to do is rewrite it. So 6d is fine, minus 11d to the third is fine, plus 3d squared is fine. But once I see this, I need to put a opposite switch on those, so it's minus 5d to the third minus 3d and plus 4. That is where you want to be careful. And again, you only have to do that whenever there's a negative outside of a parentheses. If you looked at the questions that we did in the last part, or in the first part of the lesson, when there's a plus, you can just put this by itself. You can put this by itself. You can bring this down with that here, and you can put these two things together, because a plus sign doesn't really do anything. But whenever you see that minus sign, you're going to have to slow down, write everything out, and then work it out from there. At least that's my best advice for you. From there, again, you do your usual. Highest power is third power, so those two go together to make negative 16d to the third. You have a d squared here that has nothing to go with it, so you bring it down. You have a regular one here, a regular one there. That's 6 minus 3, which is plus 3d, and then your 4 comes down after that. Again, a standard form, 3, 2, 1, 0, and you're good to go. And again, that's really the only shift on the second part of the lesson that you need to worry about, except for one problem we're going to talk about in just a second, but that's about it. And again, when you see this and you see the minus, the first thing I'm going to ask you when you come up for help is, what did I tell you to do when you have a minus? And you should say that you're supposed to switch it. So not switch it, but you rewrite it with everything without the negative. So this stays the same, negative 6k to the third plus 3k stays the same. That becomes plus 5k to the third minus 3k squared and plus 8k. Again, that's not tough. That's not a level of intelligence. That is just following directions and doing what you're supposed to do. Then you have negative 6k to the third, 5k to the third, which is negative k to the third. I don't know if the computer is going to allow you to put a 1, so if you miss it, just look out for that. You have a 3k squared that has nothing with it. You have a positive 3k to go with a positive 8k, which makes a positive 11k, and again, that is standard form, third power, second power, first power. That would be your answer. Again, it's not that hard, just be careful. And then on this one here, again, you have your 3d squared, 8d minus 2. I do not recommend you trying to subtract, because again, in my 16 years, that's where people mess up. The easiest way to do it is to distribute that negative 2d squared plus 7d minus 6. Again, people who try to subtract typically mess up because they forget that it's, a negative minus a negative, and then they got to think too deep. Just switch all those signs and go from there. That makes it a very easy question. Let me check one more time. Negative, positive, negative. Yep, so that's negative 8 here, positive 15 here, and 1 here, which I don't need the 1. So again, that is the majority of the material you're going to see on your work today. The last type of question is going to, you're probably going to have to find a way to do it, but I think the way I'm working it out for you here is probably the easiest. Although it is a higher level of algebra, I just think it's easier to do. But what it's going to do is it's going to give you a triangle. It's going to tell you what the perimeter is, and it's going to give you the length of two sides, and it's going to want you to find the length of the third side. And the easiest way to do this, if you think about this problem, and I have, let's say, 5 here, 7 there, and I know that the perimeter is 20, the easiest way to do it is to say that 20 equals 7 plus 5 plus x, or plus a question mark, which is what we're going to use here, not an x. And then you get 20 equals 12 plus a question mark, which we don't know, which then if you subtract your 12, you get 8 for the amount. And I know you think, well, why don't you put an x? Because in this case, remember, notice that we do have an x, so it's going to help out in the long term if we put our perimeter down first, which is 14x minus 6 equals 2x minus 4 plus 3x plus 5 plus something else I don't know. Again, in this case, putting an x down would be confusing because there's x's in there. But on this problem only, it is probably best to just use a question mark, because then from there what we do is we simplify our sides, so we get 14x minus 6 equals 5x plus 1 plus something I don't know. And then you'll see how this helps, because now we're going to move our 5x over by subtracting 5x. We're going to move our 1 by subtracting 1. Those two things cancel, leaving just a question mark, and you end up with 9x minus 7 equals a question mark, which obviously is your answer of what you're looking for. Again, there's other ways to work that out. If you have your own way that works consistently, go ahead. Notice I said it should work consistently. But if it doesn't work consistently, make sure you try to find something that works all the time, because you don't want to go to a quiz, and I can tell you right now, this is going to be on your quiz. You don't want to go to your quiz and not know what's going on. Also, keep in mind that your quizzes are put in place because some of you aren't taking your homework seriously enough, and your quiz on this is probably going to be at the end of the day tomorrow or Wednesday, one of those two. So try to get through as much information as you can and make sure you answer questions. Keep in mind also that the only way you do well on quizzes is by making sure you've seen all the homework, because all I do on your quiz is I take some homework questions and put them together. And that is my way of seeing if you've actually seen it or if you've actually asked about it, because missing a question on the quiz just means that you really didn't get that far on your homework, and that tells me everything I need. Also, keep in mind you can make up your homework. Just email it to me from your Google Classroom page, or actually I guess it should just be from your Google Classroom page, but let me know when your assignment gets above a 90. I'll put that in there. And also, again, remember, you can make up your tests and quizzes as many times as you need to, before, after school Tuesday and Thursday, before school, with me any day. Just make sure you get a pass. Other than that, good luck. Homework should be up on the assignment stuff for you.